It's further away. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm last talk. I know you guys are probably tired and everything. And I'm known for overblowing my talk, so I think this is like 100 slides or something, but I'm quick with this stuff. I normally cruise through them in like 25 minutes, so let me just get my timer up so I don't overshoot it too much. And okay. And the spotlight is on. All right, go. Anyways, and that thing doesn't work. Anyways, yeah, this talk is called Cloud.js is playing the other side, and it's mainly about our new game. The new game that we've done, okay, I didn't press that. Anyways, the new game that we've done is up in the arcade. It's called Cloud.js, it's about migration, I can tell you as much. But I don't want to tell you too much about it before I have taken a step back, explaining what we do and who we are. Anyways, in this talk I'll be talking about, well, why did we choose migration to actually make a game about, what the gameplay of the game actually is, what the underlying message between that is, and whether or not that's actually ethically viable. A small thing about us. We are a small indie studio from Switzerland. We're 4 people currently, and we were founded last year. I've been making games for 6.5, 7 years so far. I've also studied game design, Bachelor and Master afterwards, stuff like that. But as Blindflug Studios, we are pretty new in this thing. There's 4 people, like I said, who do like the core development of the games. There's basically Moritz, my co-founder, and me. He does most of the PR and administration stuff and stuff like that. Calls himself CEO and everything. And I call myself lead designer. And then we have Tabea, who actually made the game, who I'm presenting here today, so that's kind of weird. And there's Frederick, he's just very good at making 3D models. He loves that. And the first game we did was called First Strike. First Strike was a game about nuclear war, and it kind of got our company going. Because the idea that we had for our company is that we wanted to make as fun games as we can, but with an underlying core message behind it. And I'm not going to ask how many people have seen First Strike, because I'm just going to be depressed. Yes, it's 2 people, that's double what I normally do. Oh, that's more. So yeah, nuclear threat. You wouldn't believe that this was actually a problem for us at the moment. Because if you look at, well, let's show you the trailer first. So yeah, talking about nuclear weaponry. Nuclear weaponry in games isn't a new concept. We're not talking about, wow, that's innovative, that's not nukes. I mean, in Fallout 3 you had a mini rocket launcher that launched nukes. And even further back, if you look at StarCraft, I've been launching nukes the whole time. I've even died by a nuke in Call of Duty, which I felt like that was the best moment of Call of Duty 4. And there even was a game beforehand that really prominently spoke about the topic, of how it would feel to be in a bunker and be in control of a nuclear superpower. However, the thing is still a hot topic these days, because, I mean, if you just look back at 2012, the potential nuclear stockpile of at least warheads that we have would still be enough to, destroy our Earth a few dozen-fold, which is crazy. And added to that, if you look back at when the Cold War ended, reduction of these warheads was close to stagnating, especially from the United States side. So when we approach people with our idea of making a really fast-paced strategy game that has something to say about nuclear weaponry, all the people who were older than us, and I'm 33, were like, you guys are insane, you can't do that. Because they still remember the Cold War, but up until the Cold War ended, and the possibility of, any moment a nuclear war breaking out and annihilating existence as we know it. And even though we look at, it's still a topic that is in the news, especially if you consider North Korea or, the potential possibility of Iran building nuclear weaponry and this being a short-range missile distance off Israel. And when we launched it, the whole Ukraine crisis happened, which got us closer to, you know, a new Cold War than ever before. This is still very one-sided. Because we're talking about, you know, the possible weaponry of Iran and North Korea, and we're not really talking about the big picture, that there's way more overheads there. So, to cut this short and not talk too much about first strike, this kind of edge of having, you know, making a strategy game, but still having like the whole game trying to show you how much the Earth would get destroyed, turning from a really beautiful blue planet to like this destroyed mess, even if you win the game, and having like an Easter egg where you can actually have a very cheesy world peace screen. Got us quite a bunch of recognition in the game, and more, you know, financial success than we expected for our first game. Because we expected this to be a portfolio project, something that we show what we're capable of, and, you know, show what our mission statement kind of is, but not that it would actually sell 130,000 copies in its first year at a $4 price point, which is great, which has really got us going. And we were like newbies there, nobody knew Blindflug Studios. The reason I'm saying this is because we wanted to be as much as Monument Valley and Octodad as possible. We actually made a one-year graphic of how much we sold and what happened and how much we spent and everything, and that's on our website. So if you guys are interested in, you know, these facts and figures and everything, because we don't really have anything to hide there, on firststrike.mobi on the blog, there's that stuff. Now, the first incentive, you know, if you have something like this going, would be like, okay, let's do sequels, let's go to further platforms and everything. But we actually wanted to prove that this is something that can actually work, and something that we can do again. So we picked a new topic to talk about. And I think it's one of the most important topics of these days, which is migration. Now, why make a game about migration? Well, it is fascinating, especially if you consider the actual media coverage these days, that, I mean, even though we all have a history in migration in any country of the world, basically, that there's so much rubbish going around on who actually gets to get into different countries and how we want to keep people out, especially on a nation like the USA, in my opinion. However, talking about migration isn't as clear-cut and easy as it was with nuclear war. I mean, sure, you can talk about, you know, whether or not NATO is still viable these days, or whether it would make sense to become political power in balance of power. If you actually want to be a state that has nuclear weapons, but the end result is something that nobody wants, not even Kim Jong-un wants nuclear war, because nobody wins there. And if you're talking about migration, everything is incredibly segmented. And let me just tell you, I mean, if you're in Europe these days, even the most peaceful protests, pro or contra migration, just end in a whole mess right now. Because this is like topical as ever. So we're getting a lot of media coverage, especially about towns of Melilla. I don't know if who here is aware what Melilla is. Okay. So there actually exists a city on the African continent which is part of Spain. So Melilla is like this tiny white city which is like fenced off 3 times by all these border fences. And if you would actually make it as a migrant over the fences, you are officially in the European Union and you can apply for asylum there. So this city basically gets like ran over on a weekly basis by hundreds of migrants trying to get over these fences called what's it called? It's called barbed wire kind of things. They have a really nice name for it. It's like NATO security wires. I don't remember. It's a really weird terminology. Or I mean, we're really talking about getting a lot of course, you know, people trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea, you know, with boats. There's even these really weird pictures these days of, you know, tourist locations like Greece getting overflowed with immigrants as well. So you like the media really eats these up. You know, these pictures of tourists being right next to people who cross the seas, stuff like that. And even inside the Europe, when we're talking about the Calais tunnel, and I'm not going to show that picture now of the little kid that died, because I think that thing is utterly disgusting, that people actually need a picture of a dead child to actually realize that these are people there. But again, there's something missing here, if you look at all this coverage that we're getting. Because if you look at the net gain and net loss of migration, it is a global phenomenon, and migration routes go all over the world. So why, again, are we in Europe just talking about what happens at our borders or at Calais or stuff like that, Benghazi, Lampedusa, and we're not talking about where these people came from, why they came, and what hardships they had to endure on the way here. And that's the idea why we wanted to make something that focuses on the way these people have spent, trying to get people to have a very personal story in a gang and trying to survive as a migrant. And that is Cloud Chasers. So what is the game exactly? We have like 3 areas that are important to the game. We have like a macro game, which is all about water management. We have a micro game, which is that flying part that you've seen. And it is very narrative based. It's like our first real narrative game that we did, so that was pretty new for us. If you look at the art style and everything, we immediately always get the comparison to Journey. And I guess it's kind of fair, although the whole desert thing comes more from a contextual side, because most migration routes go for deserts. When I'm trying to pitch a game, I always say we're doing FTL in the desert, which on the gameplay side really sticks. And I was really positively surprised that today some people came to me, oh yeah, this is like FTL. And I was like, yes! I can't believe you've got it, that's awesome. So what do? You're on a trek through these randomly generated deserts. There's 5 of them, and you cross them as father and daughter. They're called Francesco and Amelia. And you have to preserve both of their health. If one of them dies, game's over. Now, in this world, water is the main currency that you use. That means you don't even need it for every step that you take for the journey, through the desert. But you also need to trade in hub towns. So everything you sell will net you water for it, and all the items you pick up at shops, or if you need healing and you need to go to a healer, you pay water for that. We have money in the game, but it's basically worthless. You just trade it for water. And the water supply at the beginning of the journey would never last to get through all those deserts. So what you need to do is you take Amelia up into the clouds and have her try to gather as much water as she can before like the enormous cloud harvesters come in, and that's like a time-based event. And then it will create a big deadly vortex and transport all the water upwards to the land above the clouds where they're trying to go. Because the land above the clouds is only accessible through those hub towns, this one that's closest to them is called the Spire, and that's kind of their goal. So the game actually ends where the stories in Armenia begin. And I'm not telling you if this is going to be a good ending, it's determined by factors on how you play during the game. Now, as I said, the whole game is randomly generated. That's where like the roguelike approach comes in. So all the mountains, rain clouds, how the desert looks like, but also a lot of visible and invisible narrative events get randomly distributed in the game. And we currently have a pool of 140 written storylines in English, and they're loosely based mostly on real immigrant stories, but we transported them to our fantasy setting that we have. And you will only get like 12 to 14 in the game. So the idea was that everybody gets like their very own immigration story that way, that is different from everybody else's. So what was the idea behind it? Why did we choose a fantasy setting for that? The idea was that, like I said, most migration routes go through deserts, and we wanted to have a setting that feels like a lot of people can relate to. It doesn't matter if you're from the US, you're European, or you're from Australia. You probably know that setting, kind of, because people have been traveling through the deserts to get to you if they're not really going by seaways. Likewise, a lot of the art style is a mishmash of Central and South American cultures and the color stadiums, and like Arabic and African iconography and housing and stuff like that. So we felt like if we make a universal setting for all of this that also has a steampunk edge, it could talk to more people and it can reach more people that way, because they feel like they can relate to that. This is the same thing like with the cloud harvesters. The idea with the cloud harvesters actually came from, it wasn't an article, I think it was a documentary, how corn farming in Central America, especially in Mexico, is almost impossible. And the background behind that is that highly subsidized and genetically modified corn farming in the US makes production so much cheaper. It basically destroyed the market in the areas where it's harder to grow crops. So the cloud harvest is kind of a metaphor for that, you know, the technological and money advantage of another nation actually robbing you of the possibility to sustain your own agricultural background. And I've talked about Melia before, and told you what it is, and that is like reflected in your goal of the game, because the spire, of course, is like, if you see pictures of Melia from afar, especially from the coast side, it really has this really white glowing edge to it. It almost looks like in the Never-Ending Story, you know, the ivory tower, which is really surreal, because I imagine people, you know, being cramped up there in the hills and having to look at the city over there, and they know it's like only 100 meters away or something, and if they could make it, they could actually properly go for asylum there. So yeah, we want people to take these two characters, to take Fragisca and Amelia, and because the game is made that way, die and die and die. Because it's a roguelike. In a roguelike, we accept death as a part of the game. You're supposed to get better. You're supposed to, you know, improve on how you manage your stuff. And that is kind of where we're trying to get across. That there's still thousands of people dying each year. And I don't even have the numbers for this year. This is like 3/4 of last year. And so it must have been over 5,000 people who died last year on their way, actually. Trying to migrate to the north, or Australia for that. Which brings me to like the hardest question. And the question is, should we even do this? And we're pretty critical of that because our big inspirations, when it comes to coming from gaming, were again like the first strike outside from the game media. We're like big fans of Resident Hoffman, like Xavier Koller, especially because he's also a Swiss guy, or Enrique's Journey from Sonia Nazario, which is a fantastic book about the train de la Muerte, or La Bestia, this train that goes through Central America and is one of the dangerous places on Earth because people get mugged and stabbed and thrown off the train and raped and everything on there because there's so many people there and there's such a high crime rate. Now, she made a book about that, detailing where this small migrant boy, Enrique, went to find his mother in the US. And she not only wrote about that, she actually rode the train. So she met this boy, interviewed him, and then, with help of course, but relived the whole journey and interviewed all these people along the way that he previously met, to actually be able to accurately portray that. And if you compare that to us, which is like this a group of very white, non-migration background Swiss guys, who made the game, it makes you question if that is something we should even be doing, or whether we're going to get like heavily criticized for as soon as the game launches. I guess it goes into the same territory as Orion, being like so clear in its message and in what it tries to convey because the whole dev team is from Africa, or why Cart Life from Richard Hoffmeyer is so accurately because he actually knows how it feels to have a no-income job and not getting anywhere because he relived that. In the end though, and there might be kind of a small conclusion there, we feel like this is still a point of view worth telling and something we have to tell now and we want to tell now. And if it means that, we also got criticized for First Strike, if it means we're getting flack for that, it doesn't really matter because in the end, the game is going to get played more, people will talk about it, and we might be able to, open up a bit of a new perspective on the hardships that people have felt on their way there. And if people call us like pigs for, charging for a game that we did, so be it. And that's kind of the thing we are most excited about because Cloud Chasers is launching like in a month, 15th of October. We'll release it on iOS and Android. And if the topic is still as big as it is now in Europe, everything could happen. That could also create a shitstorm of epic proportions. We'll see. You guys will know in a month. So. Yeah, that's my silly picture, that's me, Jeremy. There's my Twitter handle if you're into that. Write down my email if you guys want to ask anything. Also if it's like, how did you release on iOS, what do I need to do? I don't care, just write an email. I'm trying to, spread whatever I know. But like Rami said, I don't know that much, nobody knows that much about iTunes and everything. And yeah, if you have any questions, ask them now. Yeah.
So it's you look at challenging, you look at issues. How do you feel about looking at an issue through comedy or something a little more art?
Right. So the question is whether you can go at an issue like this through a comedic way, or is it not this one particularly?
Not this one particularly.
Yeah. I think comedy and satire are extremely good. The problem is that games already have this stigma that they should be fun and they should have a lot of fun, and people heavily disagree on that, right? Whether or not a game should be fun. However, if you are fun, you're mostly looked at as a toy, as a form of entertainment, something for children, for kids, and that's something you'll still get in the mass media. So I really don't know. We felt like this topic is a bit too personal and a bit too harsh because there's so many deaths surrounding around it that we shouldn't be too much fun. I don't know if a satirical approach in that way would work, but I think go for it, because I think the point is that we're trying to talk about something and that we have something in our core that we want to transport. And how you transport it, I mean, there's like this smuggle truck, right? Do you know Sky? You guys know that game? It's basically like a very small physics game with a truck where you're trying to get immigrants over the border in the US. And it was too hot for Apple, so they made Snuggle Truck out of it, where it's all baby toys and stuff. Which I guess worked in their favor, kind of. I don't know if you know the original game would have transported anything, or if that even was the intention. So, yeah. Yes.
So this is I'd say, much deeper take on the topic than Nuclear Game was. Do you at any point kind of like drop the facade of the sort of fantasy world that you've created and go, okay, hey, this is migration in the real world. This is migration around here. This is stuff.
That's a good question. The question was, if we have dropped, the facade of, this being a really cheery world and everything. And yes, we do that, and we mostly do that through text. And that's kind of the thing. Our intention was that the presentation and everything of the game is very accessible and actually kind of cute. And I don't think that's a problem. The thing is, though, what happens to these two, to Francesca and Amelia, can be quite harsh. Now, of course, we can't really incorporate, rape and death of a child and stuff like that into the game, or drug smuggling, or any of these issues, because we have had major problems with carriers and everything. And we would probably get an 18 rating, which we don't want. We want people who are younger than 18 to be able to play that game. Because, in First Strike, my main inspiration for the game was the movie War Games, which I think is brilliant. Because it's a very fun kids game. You can watch it and not care about nuclear weapons at all. But for so many people, the message of the movie stuck, and they learned something with it. And when we made First Strike, there were so many reviewers going, yes, that's like War Games, I remember that, that was amazing, oh yeah. So, if you ask me about my biggest dream personally, it would be that like in 20 years, I talk to somebody and he goes like, yeah, I played First Strike, or I played Cloud Chasers, and it taught me more about migration than I ever knew. I don't think that's gonna happen, but hey.
Kind of baseline question. How much do you think the abstraction of the game hurts the message? Because the sort of stuff you're talking about is beautiful, lovely, and makes you want to play Cloud Chasers. But a lot of people might not see those things, because those are a lot of things which are very deeply embedded in understanding the craft of video games. The roguelike thing is wonderful because the national mechanical data and actual data combined is a beautiful coherence. But that's been something again that's very few don't understand. In a similar way, the abstraction of the sort of like glider is kind of it's again very beautiful, but it's also yeah, exactly. It's also misrepresentative of how deeply impoverished a lot of people going through migrancy are. Like in South Africa, in America, poverty is not having a car. In South Africa, poverty is like not having 4 walls around. It's like completely different things. How much do you think that abstraction hurts that message?
I'm going to have a bit of a controversial stand here, because the thing is this. When it comes to serious games and entertainment games, I feel like there's not enough stuff in the middle between. Yes. And that's something we always tell to people also at First Strike. First Strike is a game at first. We designed this to be as fun as possible, which meant that we took some liberties. We were like, okay, it's all based around the real nuclear world powers, but we're going to add Australia, because gameplay-wise it makes sense that we have something in the south, even though they never even had a nuclear arms program. Which, yeah, you can criticize us for, and that's fine and everything, but I feel like there should be more games, who also take liberties, and then you can talk about, where they're wrong and where they shouldn't go more into detail and everything. Because I feel like, in movies you do that. You don't only have documentaries and pure action movies, but you have stuff in between, like War Games, which is a kids game, kids movie, but it's talking about something. Is it accurate? I don't think so. It's about a teenager hacking the Pentagon and starting a nuclear war. No, that's not accurate at all. I would love more games to have, an inspiration inside, something they want to talk about, even, but still making it their cause of having a really, really good game then, and not trying to hurt gameplay for message sake. But that's just me. Feel free to disagree or feel free to say.
So I think one of the obvious criticisms that you might get is the sort of like in ethics of you're taking these people's story and then you're monetizing it. That seems a really obvious one to me, and I'm not saying that I agree with it. It's more like, have you thought about any ways to remedy that, like to give something back or to work with people whose stories you're telling?
So when it comes to that, we actually did that at first, right? Or at least we tried to incorporate it, but we had some troubles with that. One thing is that some charity agencies didn't want to accept our money, which was weird. Because it's not like we wanted something from them. I mean, ideally, it would have been great if a charity agency would work with us to promote the game, but we're always like, hey, you don't have to do that. We just want to do our game, and we're giving back like a quarter of the income afterwards. And there were actually some who said, no, we don't want that money. Or better said, they didn't say anything. We asked them for their bank details, and they didn't reply 5 times. So we were like, come on. Now there's the other thing that there's regulations. In the App Store, you're not allowed to give to charity because they do that. They have like red apps or whatever it was called. So the problem is they don't want to be held accountable for if we will not deliver, which I get. I guess it's an American thing. So this time, it all depends on what we will be able to do, and if we find, a partner. We don't have a partner yet that would feel like, oh, I want to give to them. But in the end, if the game runs well, we might not even announce it, but give it to set aside that. There's a couple in Italy who makes boats for immigrants and to rescue them if there's a problem at the sea. And we feel like, well, it's like 3 people, they would be very happy for a few $1,000, So yeah, that's something we're highly considering in that regard.
Why don't you build the stories on the website for free?
Would be a good idea. I haven't thought about it actually. It's a brilliant idea.
5% profit. I was thinking similar to like, sure, you can pay off your sins.
Yeah, that's what I always get criticized for often.
Yeah.
It's like, it's whitewashing. Yeah, well, come on.
No, but, but like you're literally, or you said the stories are based on real stories.
Right.
Even I think just mentioning where the story comes from, the names of the people involved, I think is a valuable non-financial contribution to the story.
I was thinking something similar, like if you do finish the game, all the stories that you cross along the way, they were like, this story is based on this person's account, based on this person's account, based on this person's account, and people can take those or go into those and see the real life account. Like, that was great.
Yeah, it's obviously more work.
Yeah, but still, I really like the idea. It's
There's one more question. One more question.
I think you've been reading the long story. I'll go with you.
Okay, well, so you said how I haven't played it yet. It's a roguelike game because you're dying often. It's primitive. How have you explored that more? Because I mean, in a lot of roguelikes, they don't really dwell on the fact that you're dying. They're like, oh, you're enjoying it, and then, oh, you're dead now. Restart button's right there, usually, or something like that. It's like you try and sort of dwell on the death aspect, or use that in a way.
Right. You might call me somebody who's not really into the whole discussion of what's a roguelike and what isn't. Maybe that's my fault, but these days so many things get called roguelikes. And yeah, we often get criticism that, well, this is just like some roguelike elements. And I feel so too. I feel like it's not like a pure, old school roguelike part. It's just that when talking about the death mechanic and how we wanted to have a game where death is like an essential part, we felt like that part of the roguelike is something we're gonna grab. And like I said, we didn't really try to make a game out of other game examples. But the idea was that we first locked ourselves in for 1.5 days just watching documentaries and stuff like that. And then trying to get to the point, okay, if we want people to feel that, or if we would like to incorporate this, how could this look in the game? So it's a mishmash of a lot of things, and that's the reason why we're doing these games, kind of, because I feel that's creative. if you tell me to make a racing game, I'm going to make a mishmash of my 10 favorite racing games. But if you tell me to make a game about a topic I've never thought about making a game before, that's when I suddenly start thinking about new ideas. And that's kind of the egotistical side of why we do these stuff. Right?